A special thanks to my Patreon supporters. Reddit, what is your r/no-sleep story that actually happened? I lived in an apartment a few years ago. 4 units upstairs, 4 units downstairs. I lived upstairs, and the apartment below me was vacant. I kept hearing footsteps through the apartment, and I knew I shouldn't have. Nobody was downstairs. I asked someone to come over and listen, just to see if I was crazy. Maybe I'm just hearing other apartments since it's empty downstairs, and everything is echoing. Wrong. I kept hearing the footsteps. This went on for a solid hour. Finally, I called the landlord and the police. Apparently someone had broken in through the windows downstairs, and was walking back and forth through the apartment with a knife. Fucking horrifying. My bedroom is on the 2nd floor of the house. There's no patio/porch/overhang of any kind beneath my windows. Couple of years ago I was watching TV in bed around 2 a.m. and heard a louder than usual animal sound. Not uncommon to hear squirrels running around on the roof from time to time. Didn't think much of it. Kept on happening, and started to sound awfully close to the window and not on the roof. I ignored it for a pretty long time. After at least 40 to 45 minutes of being irritated by the noise, best guess, I had watched a couple of episodes of South Park on my DVR during the time span. I banged on the wall in hopes of scaring them off until I could get to sleep. Just 2 quick bangs with my fist, which were answered with 2 bangs on the wall right next to the window from outside. Needless to say, I just about shit and jumped out of bed. Now, my living room has a bay window, and is on the other end of the house, so I could look out that window from the side and see my bedroom window. I hustle downstairs and peek out. I see a guy standing in front of my house, below my bedroom window. He's got a knife, small pocket knife, in his hand, and he's petting the front of my house. Call the police and wait. He never leaves the front of the house even when they roll up and ultimately disarm and arrest him without much struggle. We moved into a new house a few months ago. As we were in the process of purchasing the house, the renter who was living in it died unexpectedly of natural causes in his mid-40s. He died right in the middle of the living room. Shortly after, we move into the house, and almost immediately our 2-year-old daughter starts talking about the ghost that lives in our house. Now let's be real here, she is 2 and 2-year-olds are very impressionable. Halloween had recently passed, and she had this Halloween-themed picture book that she loved to read, so it's entirely possible that all this talk of ghosts was just coming from looking through that book on a regular basis. Still, she was always telling me that the ghost was in her playhouse in the basement, or that the ghost was on the stairs, or that the ghost was standing in the corner. She never seemed to be afraid of the ghost and considered him to be her friend, so I wasn't all that concerned even if there really was a ghost haunting our house. If he's a nice and helpful ghost, it could certainly be a lot worse. I would often tell the ghost that he was welcome to stay if he wanted to, but he was also welcome to go if that would make him happier. I was about 30-70 on the ghost being real and she could see and talk to him versus the ghost being just her imagination fueled by her Halloween book. Until one day, when we were going out to the car to go to daycare in the morning. It was still dark out, and rainy. My daughter told me that the ghost was on the back deck, and then she told me that today was the ghost's birthday and she wanted to sing him happy birthday. Once again, I mostly disregarded what she was saying, as she is birthday obsessed and has in the past made us sing happy birthday to Mickey Mouse, a bowl of fruit snacks, and the bathroom. So we sang and wished the ghost a happy birthday and went on with our lives. Later that day, out of pure curiosity, I looked up the obituary of the man who had died in our house. And wouldn't you know it? It was his fucking birthday. Posted this before, but it's one of my family's favorite stories. My uncle called my mom one morning and told her this. I have 4 little cousins who never got to meet my grandfather. He passed before they were born. One morning, they ran downstairs for breakfast as they usually do. As my uncle was getting their food ready, one pointed to the fridge and said, "That's him." My uncle, not thinking much of it, said, "Who?" and looked over. They were pointing at a picture of my grandfather that they never got to meet. My cousin responded, "The man that comes and talks to us at night until we fall asleep sometimes." Not horrifying, but still, eerie. This story is not mine, it's my grandfather's. Backstory: this takes place in West Virginia in the 20s. My grandpa is the youngest of 9 and his family is very poor. They all live in a one-room house. My grandpa's sister suddenly got sick and quickly fell into a coma. They say she had a fever and would shake and even sit up in the middle of the night even though she was not conscious. She got progressively worse over the next few days and needed some sort of help. My grandpa and his oldest sister Glenna stayed behind while the rest of the family went to the neighbor's house 10 miles down the road for some food and medicine. As soon as the family got home that night, their mom went to the sister's bed and started to put a cold cloth on her head. Immediately her eyes flew open for the first time in days and she looked her mother right in the eyes and said, "The Lord wants Glenna." She fell back and twitched before going back into unconsciousness. The next morning Glenna and the sister had died. The younger sister died from the fever, and Glenna died from unknown causes. Posted a couple of times before, but definitely the freakiest shit I've ever experienced. This happened my senior year of college, Christmas break 2006. I worked for a professor that asked me to house/dog sit for him while he was out of town to see the bowl game that we were in. He was gone for 3 days and had a huge piece of land in the middle of nowhere. I invited my GF at the time. He had horses and fishing and a gator to ride around on, etc. etc. So the first 2 nights went down with no incident, but the last night, his little foofy dog is having a fit. She keeps barking at the back door. At first we blow it off, but decide to lock the dog inside in case of a coyote or something. After a while we start to get a little creeped out. I keep saying it's probably an animal and we'll be fine. My GF, not too bright, wants to go investigate to see what's outside, so I lock the door behind her. Hee, just kidding. She goes outside and says she saw something small and gray, probably a coyote, and it ran off. So, just an animal, no worries. But by this time, we're pretty spooked. The dog now starts barking at the window on the other side of the house. We're still trying to ignore it, but a little worried. We decide to get into bed, awkward silence, then I hear it. It sounds like a young girl singing a soft, eerie lullaby. I don't say anything, hoping that my mind is playing tricks on me. My GF says, "Let's get the fuck out of here." I say, "Why?" She says, "You didn't hear that little girl singing." Okay, let's get the fuck out, and we got the fuck out. I even called someone to talk to me while we walked out to my car. Next morning, went to clean up the house and such. Most scared I've ever been. Ever. Hunting with father-in-law. It's well before sunup, maybe 5 a.m., and we hiked to a patch of trees and sat down, him maybe 70 yards south of me, with me facing out into a clearing. He had a flashlight and I didn't have one on me at the time. It was so dark you couldn't see a hand in front of your face. After about 20 minutes, I hear something really big walking maybe 10 yards in front of me. From the sound of the leaves/branches breaking, it sounded human-sized. It startled me and I loudly called for my father-in-law to turn on the flashlight. Right in front of me, where the noise was coming from, I hear his voice say, "Nah, it's cool." The noise happened again about 10 minutes later and I called out to him, assuming it was him making the noise. No response, so I made my way over to his camp and asked him if he had just walked near me. He said he hadn't gotten up the whole time, and was confused why I would have heard his voice. Skinwalkers, man. My paternal grandmother died when I was 6. I lived in New York. She lived in PA. I met her maybe twice. I was 6 years old, asleep in bed one night, and for whatever reason I woke up and walked into my parents' bedroom. My father had an easy chair in one corner for reading. I sat in the chair. On the opposite wall was my father's closet. It opened, and Grandma came out and stood about 6 feet away. "I just wanted to say goodbye," she said, smiled, waved, and turned back and walked back into the closet, closing the door behind her. I went back to my room. About 2 hours later, about 6 a.m., the phone rings. It was a call from PA that Grandma Catherine had died in her sleep. My mother came to wake me up to tell me, and I said, "I know." "What do you mean?" "She came to say goodbye last night. She made me repeat the story 3 times, and then told me never, ever to tell my father that story. And I never did." I've posted this before in a similar thread. For reference, this happened a few months ago. Like most couples, my husband and I have a designated side of the bed. I sleep on the right and him on the left. My comfortable sleep position is laying on my left side and facing the window, away from him. He alternates between facing the bathroom door or me. One night a few weeks back, I'm fighting my sleep. I'm laying on my left side, per the norm, but I just can't get comfortable. My neck is sort of sore from laying on my left, so I turn over and face my husband. When I turn over, I am not only faced with my husband's back, but with a large shadow standing over him. Immediately the shadow stretches to me and somehow communicates for me to turn over. I remember thinking its face was contorted, somehow expressing malice, but I can't for the life of me remember what it looked like. I didn't hear a voice, but the communication was urgent and angry. Like it wanted to hurt me. Without thinking, I turn back around and quickly fall asleep. To be honest, I'm not even sure if I was dreaming. The next morning, my husband and I wake up around the same time and go about our usual routine. I don't say anything because my husband doesn't like to talk about supernatural stuff or the like, which I felt it was. However, this morning is strange and he seems to be uncomfortable. After a lot of prodding, he finally admits he had an awful nightmare. He dreamt a demon was trying to make him do things while he was sleeping, really evil shit, wouldn't elaborate, and I woke up during this and the demon attacked me. I didn't tell my husband that I remember the same thing, only I wasn't sure if I was asleep. TLDR, turned over to face my husband while sleeping, which I never do. Demon shadow got in my face and communicated that I should turn around. I did. Next morning husband has same dream, but demon was telling him to hurt me / attacked me. Posted my story over in r/humanoid encounters. In 1993, our family lived in a small town called Ritzville, Washington. I was 5 years old at the time, and what I experienced has left me thinking about it every single night for the past 22 years. I shared a room and bunk bed with my little brother. The room had a small, fairly deep closet located a few feet from the foot of the bunk bed. Located on the wall was small vent that at night, when the living room light was on, would shine through, giving my room a slight ambient glow. Well, one night I had to go to the bathroom, and when I sat up and was about to take the covers off, I noticed that at the foot of the bunk bed was this tall black figure with a giant oval head that spanned the width of the bunk bed staring at me. It had 2 small yellow eyes that were far apart, and I noticed this thing stood around 6 feet tall. Its skin was charcoal and lumpy. I stared at it for a good 5 seconds before I threw the covers over my head. 5 seconds of this monster being ingrained into my head. I could feel the evil surrounding it. I was up for a while before I fell asleep again, so I have no idea how long it was there. In the morning the first thing I noticed was the closet door. I make it a habit to close closet doors every night, but it was wide open. My mom was the first to know about it, and you know how most parents kind of wave off their kids' experiences as a bad dream? She didn't. She knew I saw something because they've seen things. I had nightmares for weeks after seeing it. In my dreams this being picked me up and started torturing me. I haven't seen it since and I never want to see it again. About 4 years ago I was getting off work late around 11 p.m. when I hopped on the highway to head home. I got onto the I-10 in the middle of Phoenix, Arizona. This a big city on the busiest highway they have. But when I got on there was no one for a mile or two until I came across a police cruiser driving about 5 miles an hour zigzagging back and forth the entire width of the highway with lights on. This was the first time in my 15 years of driving I've ever encountered something like this and did not know what to do, so I slowed down to his speed and just stayed behind him. We were the only two on the road and this crap went on for about 20 minutes. I started creaking out because there was just no one else on the road. Like, was I not supposed to be here? WTF is going on? And then just like that the cop turned his lights off and took off, and fast. So I did too, for about a quarter mile until I started coming across the most insane catastrophe I have ever seen. There were at least 100 wrecked cars on the side of the road and in the road. Some looked like minor damage while some were completely fucked. I remember seats from a minivan just lying in the middle of the road. But the weirdest part was there were no people. Not a single fucking one. No drivers, passengers, no cops, paramedics, fire trucks, nothing. It's like this huge crazy crash happened and they came and loaded everyone up and just left. It was like driving through a scene of The Walking Dead. Completely unreal. 4 years later and I have not met a single person who saw it or found a news article on it. People think I'm crazy. I worked the graveyard shift in a hospital kitchen about 5 years ago. Before the kitchen was renovated a few years prior, our dish room used to be part of the morgue. While I was training, I'd frequently feel like someone was watching me, especially when I crossed into that part of the hallway. Every time I went into the dish room, something would be moved, turned over, or missing. Assuming it was my coworker, I didn't think anything of it. About a week later, my coworker leaves, and I'm left on my own. Every night, I would hear carts being moved around, dishes being put away, and silverware rattling. If I would leave for a minute, I'd get back and my radio would be switched to a different station. It got to the point where I was terrified to come to work every night. I called my old coworker, told her what was going on, and she very calmly said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about George." Apparently, George was a nurse/medical examiner who had a stroke and died while at work. He was in his 50s, I was told. From then on, everything actually went quite well. I introduced myself to George, asked him to please keep it down, and as long as I said hi to him as soon as I started work, he didn't seem to want to bother me anymore. It took us a little while to find a radio station we could agree on, but we worked harmoniously after that. When I left the job a year later, I made sure I told the girl that replaced me. I tell this one all the time. I used to live in a bad part of town, but the community was very close and we all played soccer together inside the apartment complex. Nobody really cared since we never broke a window and they would usually come out and chat with each other while they watched us play. Anyway, we were all tired and decided to take a break and I went to lean against a tree. From where I was sitting, if I looked to the left and the right, there were 2 dark alleys that led to the back area of the apartments. Out of the corner of my eye, 2 shiny eyes caught my attention and I just stared for what seemed ages and I got that sensation that I was about to be attacked. I tried to tell people something was there but the words wouldn't come out, and there was also the fear of looking stupid in front of everyone. Then whatever that thing was, it came out fast and ran from one alley to the next one. There was at least 20 people there, and everyone saw it. You could hear all the girls screaming and the panic in everyone. I had no reaction, I just stood there, and along with 2 to 3 more people we were the closest to this creature. It did not attack us though, it just ran by and disappeared into the dark alley. I honestly thought it was going to kill me as it was huge, I'd say maybe 7 to 8 feet tall. After that we all just stayed home and tried to figure out what happened that night, but being in a Mexican neighborhood, all the families believe in this stuff and said it was the chupacabra, and the fear eventually died down. The scary thing is I googled chupacabra years later and some pictures look very similar to what we saw that day. A tall 7 to 8 black figure with the bony body of a starving dog that ran like a raptor but more upright as it had long hands but not to proportion with the rest of its huge body. This is pretty much what we saw if it helps your imagination a bit. My dad used to visit some clients who lived in a creepy isolated farmhouse. People claim to have seen ghosts and spirits around the farm since the 1850s, and the owners of the house joke about it frequently. On one visit to his clients, they sat in an empty room around a desk. Now this room was literally empty apart from the desk, no bookshelves, no furniture. They were discussing the area when my dad brings up the ghost spotted in the farm, and the client tells him about a middle-aged man who died here 60 years ago. 10 to 20 minutes go on, they go into more business-related stuff. And literally out of nowhere, drops an obituary. A freshly cut obituary. My dad caught it out of the air and inspected it. It belonged to that very man they were discussing earlier. And to clarify, there was nothing in the room for it to fall from. I even have a picture my dad sent me of the obituary. I will try my best to find it if you guys want me to. When my family hit hard times, we had to move into a small house where our uncle had recently shot and killed himself. He had done this because of his depression after his wife had overdosed on pills and died the summer before. It all happened so quickly that when we moved in there was still a bit of blood in one of the rooms. But on the third or fourth night of living there, my sister and I, who were sharing a room in the tiny house, were awake in our room playing video games at around 1 to 2 in the morning, when someone knocks at our door. We didn't think anything of it and shouted for whoever was outside our door to come in. No answer. Another knock. We stop and stare at the door and another knock comes. The doorknob does a full rotation and snaps back as if someone turned it and let go very quickly. I get up and open the door expecting to see one of my other sisters or my mother, the only other people in the house. I opened the door and stared into an empty hallway. I walk down the hall and peek into the other bedroom. My 2 younger sisters and my mother are both fast asleep.